we finished step 7. Everyone is now forgiven and has moved to the next level, right? Good. If you didn't, just hold on to that for now. See me later. So we are moving into step 8, and that is called the power of ownership. Step 8 says, we may direct amends to all persons we have harmed unless to do so would injure them or others. And it is Romans 12:18. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So I just wanted to run that by you, but tonight we're not doing a lesson. We have a fabulous, fabulous testimony, and I'm very excited about this testimony. I met this young lady about 3.5 years ago at Recovery. She was quiet and shy, just like I was quiet and shy, but now that you know me, you're like, yeah, right. But I just want you to just sit back and listen at what God can do. So without mixing words and start crying, I'm going to call Heather to the stage, and she is going to share her testimony with us.
All right, y'all. I'm not sure if you're going to get the New York me or if you're going to get the Johnston County me, but we'll work through it, okay? So my name is Heather, and I've known Beth and Rich for a while, about 3-4 years now. I met Rich first because we did some serving and putting up chairs at Temple. But I am a grateful believer in God. I am a survivor of past abuse, and I struggle with trust, fear, and social anxiety. I gave my shame over to God on the altar in July of 2019, and that's how I'm able to share my story. I guess you could say that I had a normal childhood, as normal as can be. When you grow up in a small northern New York town that has a population of only 1,200 people, where the nearest hospital is an hour away, and where the graduating class size of the local school averages 15 seniors. And yes, that was a public school, the only one in my town. Most of the kids that I grew up with dreamt fervently of getting away after high school, but I never planned on moving as far away as North Carolina. My immediate family consisted of my dad, mom, and my sister. My grandparents on my dad's side lived about a mile up the road, and I was always welcome to tag along with them wherever they might go. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until we were in school, and my dad was a forester when I was little, and then got a job working for the town as I got older. When you grow up in a small town, it's said that you know everything about everyone. This was definitely true, as our class was tight-knit, and I always felt like I had friends. However, I was different because I was shy and clumsy and absolutely loved to read. My grades were good, and just like most everyone else in my school, I was involved in just about everything that I could be. I went to church on Sundays and was involved with youth groups. Once I reached junior high and high school, I was in band, chorus, school plays, and played volleyball, softball, and soccer. Soccer and music were my absolute loves in high school. Despite all of this, entering high school, I felt pressured to have a boyfriend. I can honestly say that peer pressure makes an already different teenager feel even worse about their situation. So when a teenage boy in my class started showing interest in me, I thought it was too good to be true. He was a nerd too, socially awkward, but we all got along and knew each other in my class, so where was the harm? I would learn quickly that his mood could change like the wind, and that I was really not a girlfriend to him in the true sense. Our parents played golf together, there was family dinners, and we would go boating on the lake in the summer together. This meant that we were around each other a lot. I was 14 when the occasional experimentation began, and at first it was fairly consensual, but sometimes odd. Over time, it progressed to not consensual and sometimes downright bizarre. I endured emotional abuse, bruises, and the worst physical scars occurred the day he told me he was going to cut off my legs and, as a show of power, sliced my inner thighs with a fishing knife. During this time, I tried to get help from people. I tried my dad, my high school French teacher. That day, I happened to walk into class and display my upper arm with its perfectly purple, softball-sized bruise from being punched repeatedly. And I tried others. No one got involved. I would take matters into my own hands and make up excuses to not go with my parents when they had dinners at his family's house. That led to extra emotional or physical torment the next time I was in his presence. I played the game for 2.5 years before leaving a letter documenting my abuse in my math folder with my homework. For a moment, I felt relief and safety. Little did I know, my friend Shane was unpacking his bags in my heart and would become my sidekick for the next 28 years. Because my story began to unfold at school, awareness classes were held. I can remember sitting across the room from him at one as we discussed why things like this happened. And he raised his hand and plain as day stated that it could happen because that person belonged to you. Obviously, his response was dismissed as inaccurate, but his icy blue eyes and that smug confidence haunt me to this day. My case would end up going to trial. He would get 6 months in jail and therapy, and I got the supposed security of him having a 10-year restraining order, as well as him being on the New York State Sex Offenders Registry. Comments about me ruining his life were plentiful. His father went so far as to suggest that I didn't belong walking across the stage at my high school graduation if he couldn't be there. Proudly, I finished third in my class and escaped to college 4 years away from home. Once in college, I tried hard to put all of it behind me. I was an accounting major and had luckily landed myself an honor scholarship to help pay for school. My honors counselor was also the director of our college's a cappella group, and he quickly recruited me to sing with them. I was trying hard to feel like I belonged somewhere, as well as put my abuse behind me. But since I had quit my therapy sessions soon after they started, because they didn't feel like they were doing me much good, I was on my own to deal with all of the emotions and scars. I was fearful of people, especially men, and certainly didn't want to be hurt again. After awkward, failed attempts at relationships, I began treating men as if they were objects. If I wasn't good enough to be treated right, I wouldn't give anyone the chance to treat me any kind of way. This began my promiscuity and drinking. I was, after all, in college to have fun, right? I managed to survive the first year, but realized that I was in the wrong major. I spent my summer at home working in a local tourist craft store, as well as trying to figure out what I was going to do. I returned to school that fall as a pre-nursing major. It was an easy switch. I loved my prerequisites, and it started to calm down a bit. I also met an older guy that I thought I might kind of like. I dated him for over a year, but before things got a little sideways again. He was financially not able to remain in college, and I was half a semester behind being able to start the nursing program. After he moved home to Arkansas, I finished up my fall semester and decided that it was pointless to make my parents pay for the spring semester. I was only saving them money, right? So I left college in January, packed up my car, and left for Arkansas. I arrived on his doorstep and was miraculously welcomed into his mother's home. Living in Arkansas was definitely a change from New York. It was fun at first, but it wasn't long before feelings of homesickness would set in. Plus, I realized that smoking marijuana, hanging out, and not working was not going to get me very far in life. Soon, I would decide that I was never going to return to nursing school if I stayed in Arkansas, so sadly, I would pack up my car and return to New York. My newest secret and I would now have to figure out the next steps. Sorry. Of course, my parents were happy to have me home, and I planned to return to my original college in the fall. But I had a secret, one that was going to change my college and nursing plans. You see, I came back from Arkansas with a tiny human inside of me. Scared and feeling alone, I would begin to weigh my options. At the age of 20, I had an abortion. No one knew. The few people that my boyfriend had told about the pregnancy would be told that I miscarried. I had turned my back on God in high school after the abuse, and so even though I had been very active in church growing up, and even attended a few masses with friends at my Catholic college, I was alone with my sins. I quickly returned to drinking and unhealthy coping. My pal Shame was right there beside me, telling me how horrible I was. I would throw myself wholeheartedly into the next 2 years of nursing school. I started talking to a guy from home who had joined the military, and 2 years later, when I graduated nursing school, I would move to North Carolina to start a life with him there. The first couple of months in North Carolina were an adjustment. Not long after I moved to Fayetteville, we learned he would be deploying soon, and I would be alone in North Carolina. We decided to get married on July 13th, 1999, at the courthouse in Fayetteville. Nervous and feeling alone in a strange place, I would fail my first nursing board, and it would be 2 years before I was even brave enough to try it again. I quickly fell into the role of military wife. My husband was indeed deployed by the fall of 1999. His job was psychological operations, and he was airborne. For those of you not in the know, airborne means that you jump out of perfectly good airplanes periodically and pray that your parachute opens and that you land correctly. We adjusted to married life somewhat okay and dreamed of an overseas assignment such as Germany or Italy so that we could both go. As months passed, there would be suspicions that he might be having an affair, but I could never prove anything. At this point, we were working, paying off bills, and being adults. One day at work, I would receive a telephone call letting me know that my husband was on the way to the hospital. You see, even though it was a beautiful day, it was windy, as May can be in North Carolina. And when he jumped from that perfectly good airplane during training, something went wrong. His parachute had collapsed, and he would be released from the hospital days later to heal from a fractured pelvis. During his healing process, I was working full-time. I took and passed my nursing boards, and I became more suspicious of his behavior. It would be shrugged off by him as a porn addiction, and he would assure me that it wouldn't interfere with our marriage, and my naive self believed him blindly. I started working at a local hospital in May of 2001 and quickly found my passion. I felt that for the first time in a long time, I was where I should be. My husband would be medically discharged from the Army just months before the 9/11 terrorist attacks. We counted our blessings, mourned for the losses, and adjusted to non-military life in Clayton, North Carolina. Married life would continue with the same bumps and bruises. I would occasionally be suspicious of behavior, it would be swept under the rug, and we would continue on. We didn't have a perfect marriage, but it wasn't horrible either. My temper would flare, arguments sometimes left me feeling trapped and scared, and having never processed my prior abuse, I was angry and opinionated, and I'm a New Yorker. Looking back, I can see that God never gave up on me, even though I wanted nothing to do with him. We had our first child in October of 2004, and I would work tons of overtime to keep us on top of bills, as his current employment wasn't permanent. Months after I had my daughter, my anger and resentment was affecting my home, my job, and the people around me, and I was finally diagnosed with postpartum depression. Little did I know, he had a secret. Shortly after my daughter was born, he decided to return to school to become a police officer. I supported him, and he had been an officer for almost 2 years when we had our son in 2008. By this time, his supposed porn addiction was becoming more prominently noticeable as not just porn. I would try repeatedly to make my marriage continue to work, and we were spiraling out of control. By 2012, I had made up my mind that I was going to hang on to the marriage as long as no one was in danger for the sake of the kids. But God. In July of 2013, I was cleaning some drawers that we'd never used and discovered a phone that I didn't realize we still had. That day would wind up turning my already out of control life upside down. However, that day in July, as events unfolded, I was uncertain as to how much more I could take. What events, you ask? It was another child. A child that was born 11 months prior to my daughter. A child that his mother knew about and was paying child support for. A child that he had never met. After the initial shock, I would once again pick myself up and face the problem head on, but never really deal with the emotions yet again. Are we sensing a trend here? I encouraged him to meet his son and would then encourage his son to meet our children. By October, though, I couldn't take any more, and I gave him the ultimatum that either his so-called girlfriend went or I was. He stated, "Oh, so you're going to ruin the kids' Christmas?" I stayed one more time, but it was the last time. By February of 2014, I had moved out. There would continue to be arguments and accusations that I was to blame because I had left the family. I didn't allow that to bother me and continued on. I felt at peace for a change, and even though I was spiraling out of control in a different direction, at least I felt that I could control it. I had struggled with my weight for as long as I could remember, but I had found CrossFit and my control. I could control what went into my body and be a healthier me, and I was doing it all so that I could take care of my children. My food was measured and weighed, and I barely had cheat meals. I worked out as often as I could. I had confidence in myself again, and the kids and I, we were getting along just fine. But alcohol was drowning my pain. I was smoking cigarettes and walking a fine line with my coping skills. I would find myself dating someone new by the end of 2014, but honestly, my expectations were low. I didn't believe that I could trust anyone, and I was done with being hurt. Thankfully, God had other plans for me. In 2017, I would find myself at a church in Selma called Temple. My boyfriend of almost 3 years had started going to a recovery program there on Friday nights. We both had been raised in church and decided that it was time to start going back. I would periodically attend Sunday and Friday nights, mostly to support him, because I knew I had issues, but I sure didn't think the church could help me. After attending Temple on and off for a year, Daniel, who was now my fiance, and I decided to get baptized together on May 25th, 2018. To recommit ourselves to God and church. I gotta pause a second. Sorry. John 10:10 says that the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Satan sure attacked full force the next day while I was at work. I was served papers by the Johnston County Sheriff's Department indicating that decisions I had made in my life put my children in danger and that my ex-husband had been granted emergency custody of my children. I was devastated. I didn't think that I would continue and was sure that I was going to end up in the psych ward of my hospital that I had worked at for 17 years. My peace from being baptized the night before was shattered. Once again, I picked myself up and continued. This time was different, though. We used recovery tools and reached out to friends and church members for prayer and support. I quickly had a lawyer, my children were returned to me, and I would soon discover that my ex had used his prior position as a police officer and knowledge of my life in order to manipulate the custody schedule into something permanent and court-determined. During this fight, my father would start showing signs of an unknown illness. I would continue to fumble through, going to church and recovery sporadically, but still not fully committed, because after all, I was going to hell since I had killed my baby. What did it matter? It matters. On October 26, 2018, I would finally lay it all down on the altar and take my first surrender chip. I would finally begin the process of recovery for real. Devastated by my father's cancer diagnosis, I dropped to my knees that night and started bargaining with God. I told him that I would return to God and church and heal and serve and obey as long as he would heal my father. As I stood up from the altar, thinking that my face and shirt were soaked from crying, I panicked as I realized I had blood everywhere. Somewhere in the midst of my crying, my nose had started bleeding, and I was immediately mortified. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't do anything to draw attention to myself. Thankfully, one of the leaders was nearby, and she recognized my panic and grabbed the nearest box of Kleenex. I knew leaving recovery that night that my bargaining was not the right way to go about fixing things with God, but it was finally a start to my own healing. It would be a while before I was able to start a process group, but once I did, I would be confident enough to lay my shame on the altar. After 28 years, it was time for my friend to go. It was through the words and reminder of one of my leaders that I finally had a breakthrough and believed that I could possibly be forgiven. She placed on my heart Isaiah 1:18-20, which says, "Come now, let us settle the matter, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red as crimson, they shall be like wool. If you are willing and obedient, you will eat the good things of the land. But if you resist and rebel, you will be devoured by the sword." Working through the steps, I discovered that I am a horrible, underline it 3 times, sponsee. I struggle to reach out to people when I need help. But despite this, I finally worked the steps and made amends to my old boyfriend over my abortion, and it went surprisingly better than planned. Remember, the amends process is not for them, it's for your own healing. It could ruin or strain a relationship. We are just blessed when it does not. After completing my first process group, I struggled with the idea of serving. I still do not want attention drawn to me, and I am extremely awkward with small talk. That is why you most often will see me helping in a way that is behind the scenes. I recently stepped in to help as co-leader to my current process group when we lost a leader due to health issues. I have also started serving as a process group coach, where I hope I can help others work through the steps to recovery. My family and I attend Temple and Recovery Alive regularly, sometimes branching out to Bethel Church in Goldsboro on the occasional Friday night. This May will mark 23 years of living in North Carolina, which is how long it's been since I smoked marijuana. I haven't had a cigarette since 2016, and I haven't used alcohol as a coping mechanism since 2018. I struggle with food still, but in January, a friend in my process group encouraged us all to choose a word for the year. I chose abundance, not because I want a lot of things in my life, but because I want my life to be filled with God. My word sits on my windowsill behind my kitchen sink, where I'm reminded daily of God's grace and love. To the newcomer, I want to say, don't set up camp with shame. There's a really good song about fear being a liar. Well, guess what? Shame is too. Don't let either keep you from healing. You walked through the doors to Recovery Alive because you wanted something different. Make the choice to keep coming back and working the steps, because I promise you, your life will change. Unpack those bags at the altar that you have been carrying with you. Whether it's shame, fear, trust, addiction, or anything else, turn it over to God and let Him start handling things for you. Pray, get connected, start a process group, and most importantly, keep not quitting. Yeah. Because healing takes time. But guess what? My God, our God, He can and He will help you do it. Unfortunately, my dad would never be healed from his cancer, but we were given time to become accustomed to losing him. COVID ruined a year of possibly being able to see him due to his weakened immune system. But I was able to tell him goodbye before he passed away in January of 2021. This has, as expected, added grief to my struggles. But I now know that I have the tools and support needed to continue to heal from these struggles, grow my relationship with God, and get through the bad parts of life. And for that, I am grateful. Thank you for letting me share.
Daniel, he who finds a good wife finds a good thing. Amen. All right, if the worship team will come back and you guys can remain standing. What a powerful testimony. And she's right, there were a couple of themes in there. There was themes of moving. Okay, I'm going to run away. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to run to Arkansas. I'm going to beat this thing. I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to get away. I'm going to do it myself. And she was trying to do this thing without God. And then she talked about being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. That's because we need Jesus as that right person. She said her life was out of control. And it sounds out of control. Abortions, abuse, just running from this life. And she picked up a 6-month chip tonight, even though she's been in recovery a lot longer than 6 months. And they're going to put some chips out tonight. He's working on it. So if you are running from issues, you're running from problems, I want you to think about picking up that chip. So tonight, I picked up a 3-year chip. For me, this 3-year chip isn't about an eating disorder. This chip is not about codependency or self-worth. This chip is when, like Heather, I decided this is where I'm going to start, because my world was upside down. I lost everything. in 1 month, everything, and I knew God was the only way I was going to make it out. So I picked up a chip and I said, God, I'm going with you. So tonight, if you need to lay down drug abuse or alcohol abuse or child abuse or just the ugliness of this life, I want you to lay it down at this altar and pick up a chip. Or if you just want to say, God, I'm starting over and I'm going to follow with you. I want you to be my guide. I want you to come pick up a chip, because this can be the start. Call it a rededication if you will, but you're saying tonight, you know what? I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better. I'm going to let God light my path one step at a time. So whether you have an individual struggle or you're just saying to yourself tonight, you know what? I'm going to start tonight. This is going to be my starting point. As the worship team plays, I want you guys to come down and pick up a chip.